May 12, 1943. North Atlantic, 320 miles southwest of Iceland. The diesel engines of U-456 rumble through the steel hull as Captain Lieutenant Max Martin Teachert stands on the conning tower, scanning the horizon. It's 1:47 hours. Nomon. The cloud cover sits thick and low, swallowing even the stars. Perfect conditions, or so he believes. His boat has been running on the surface for 43 minutes now, recharging batteries depleted from 8 hours submerged. The air is bitter cold, and spray from the moderate swells stings his face as the U-boat cuts through the darkness at 14 knots. Teachert adjusts his binoculars, sweeping the black void that surrounds his vessel. Visibility is perhaps 200 meters at best. Beyond that, nothing but impenetrable darkness. He's done this hundreds of times surfacing under the cover of night, vulnerable but necessary. The Type VIIC submarine cannot operate submerged indefinitely. The electric motors drain the batteries within a day of continuous use, and the only way to recharge them is to run the diesels on the surface. It's a calculated risk every U-boat commander must take. Herr Kalun, batteries at 68%, reports Oberleutnant Werner Henke from below, his voice echoing up through the hatch. Very good, Teachert replies, not taking his eyes from the horizon. 20 more minutes, he thinks. 20 more minutes and we'll have enough charge to dive and hunt. Next to him, the watch officer, Lieutenant Klaus Bargston, shifts his weight. The young officer has been with the boat for only 2 patrols, but has already learned the routine. 4 men on the bridge: the commander, the watch officer, and 2 lookouts. Each scanning a quadrant of the surrounding ocean. Each knowing that their survival depends on seeing the enemy before being seen. But tonight, there is nothing to see. That's when Funkmart Johann Weber's voice crackles through the voice pipe, urgent and strained. Bridge. Metox contact. Bearing 340. Strong signal. Teachert's blood goes cold. Metox, the French-made radar detector that's supposed to warn them when British aircraft are using their ASV Mk II radar to hunt submarines. But this makes no sense. The Metox has been quiet all night. No warnings. No intermittent pulses. Nothing. And now suddenly, a strong contact? Are you certain? Teachert shouts down the pipe. Jawohl, Herr Kalun. Very strong now. He must be close. Teachert spins, scanning the sky. The lookouts do the same, their binoculars pressed against their faces, searching desperately through the darkness. Where is it? In this visibility, they should be able to see nothing, which means the enemy should see nothing too. Unless the sound reaches them before the sight. A deep, droning roar of engines, growing louder by the second. Teachert's stomach drops. Too late. Far too late. Alarm, he screams. Dive. 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 The klaxon blares its terrifying 2-tone wail as the lookouts scramble for the hatch. Teachert is right behind them, his boots clanging on the ladder rungs as he drops into the control room. Above him, Bargston pulls the hatch shut and spins the wheel, sealing them in. Flood. Take her down. Steep angle. The chief engineer, Obersteuermann Fritz Wenzel, yanks the levers that open the ballast tank vents. The sound of rushing water fills the boat as thousands of gallons of seawater pour into the tanks, dragging U-456 down by the bow. The deck tilts forward at a severe angle. Men grab handholds, equipment rattles, and somewhere in the stern compartment, something crashes to the deck. Teachert watches the depth gauge. 5 meters. 8 meters. 12 meters. Not fast enough. Never fast enough. The explosion comes at 14 meters. The detonation is catastrophic, a massive hammer blow that seems to lift the entire submarine and shake it like a terrier shakes a rat. The lights flicker and die, plunging them into absolute darkness for 3 seconds before the emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in red. Men are thrown against bulkheads. The sound is beyond deafening. It's a physical force that drives the air from your lungs and makes your organs vibrate inside your chest. Cork insulation rains down from the overhead. A pipe ruptures somewhere aft, releasing a high-pressure jet of seawater that screams through the hull. The hydrophone operator, his headset torn from his ears by the blast, clutches his head and screams soundlessly. Teachet can see his mouth open but can hear nothing over the ringing in his own ears. Damage report. Teachet shouts, though his own voice sounds distant and muffled. Reports flood in from every compartment. The stern torpedo room has flooding manageable, but the pump is struggling. The starboard diesel engine has torn from 2 of its mounts and will need hours of work to secure. Electrical junction box 3 has shorted out. The attack periscope won't rise. And most critically, they're losing depth control. The bow planes are damaged and responding sluggishly. But they're alive. U-456 has survived, though barely. Teachet orders them down to 80 meters, then 100, then 120. Deep. Silent. Hiding in the black water while above them, the British aircraft. He's certain it was a Sunderland or perhaps a Liberator, circles like a vulture, waiting for debris, oil slicks, or any sign of a kill. They stay down for 6 hours. 6 hours of silent running, every non-essential system shut down, every man barely breathing as they listen for the sound of screws that would indicate the arrival of destroyers to finish what the aircraft started. But no ships come. Eventually, the hydrophone operator reports the aircraft engines have faded. The hunter has left. When U-456 finally surfaces at 7:53 hours in daylight now, which adds its own risks, Teachet climbs through the hatch and surveys his boat. The damage is extensive but repairable. What cannot be repaired is the question burning in his mind, the same question that will haunt him and thousands of other U-boat commanders in the months to come. How? How did that aircraft find them in total darkness? How did it navigate directly to their position with such precision that its depth charges? Teachet counts for separate detonation points in the water around his boat fell within meters of their hull. The Metox gave them warning, yes, but only seconds before the attack. Not the usual several minutes that would indicate an aircraft searching with the older metric wavelength radar. This was different. This was as if the enemy could see them as clearly as if it were noon on a clear day. Teachet isn't alone in his confusion. As U-456 limps toward its base at St. Nazaire for repairs, radio messages crackle between boats across the Atlantic. Each commander reports the same phenomenon. U-boat after U-boat attacked on moonless nights. Attacked with impossible accuracy. Attacked by aircraft that seem to possess some kind of supernatural ability to locate submarines in conditions that should render them invisible. Corvettenkapitän Peter Kramer, commanding U-333, sends a particularly disturbing message after surviving an attack southwest of the Azores, attacked 2:30 hours. Nomon. Cloud cover absolute. Metox silent until aircraft overhead. 4 depth charges straddled boat. How are they finding us? From U-boats operating off the coast of West Africa to those prowling the convoy routes south of Greenland, the reports are the same. The British and, increasingly, the Americans have developed something new. Something the Germans don't understand. Something that's turning the Battle of the Atlantic into a slaughter. At BDU Befehlshaber der Unterseeboot, U-boat command in Berlin, Großadmiral Karl Donitz reads these reports with growing alarm. His staff officers gather around the plotting table, studying the loss rates that have climbed to unprecedented levels. In May 1943 alone, 43 U-boats have been lost. 43 boats and their crews, roughly 1,800 men gone in a single month. The rate is unsustainable. They have improved their radar, suggests Corvettenkapitän Günther Hessler, Donitz operations officer and son-in-law. But the Metox should detect it. The Metox does detect it, Donitz replies, his voice tight with frustration. But only at the last moment. The commanders report warnings seconds before attack, not minutes. This is not the same radar they were using last year. Perhaps the British have found a way to reduce the detection range of their radar, offers another officer. Or perhaps they are using intermittent transmissions. But Donitz shakes his head. He's been fighting this war at sea for 3.5 years now, and he knows when something fundamental has changed. The British have always been formidable opponents. Their ASDIC submarine detection system, their depth charges, their persistent convoy escorts have made every patrol a deadly gamble. But this is different. This is a technological leap that has suddenly tilted the balance of power in the Atlantic. What Donitz doesn't know, what none of the German commanders know, is that the British have indeed made a leap. Not just an improvement on existing technology, but a revolution. Deep in the telecommunications research establishment at Malvern, and in laboratories at the University of Birmingham, British scientists have developed a device called the cavity magnetron. This device can generate high-powered radar pulses at a wavelength of just 10 centimeters, a fraction of the 1.5 meter wavelength of the older ASV Mk II radar. This centimetric radar, designated ASV Mk III, is so powerful and precise that it can detect a surfaced U-boat from 10 miles away. 10 miles. In complete darkness. Through clouds. Through rain. The U-boat commanders aren't being hunted by pilots with exceptional eyesight or lucky guesses. They're being painted on a radar screen as clearly as a ship on a bright day, tracked as they move, targeted with mathematical precision. And the Metox detector? Useless. It's designed to detect radar wavelengths between 1.3 and 2 meters. The 10 centimeter wavelength of the new British radar is completely invisible to it. The Metox operators aboard U-456 and every other U-boat in the Atlantic are listening for a signal that their equipment cannot physically receive. They might as well be trying to see ultraviolet light with the naked eye. Back aboard U-456, as the damaged submarine crawls across the surface toward France, Teachet stands on the bridge and watches the sunset paint the western horizon orange and red. In 6 days, they'll reach port. In 6 days, he'll make his report to his flotilla commander. In 6 days, he'll try to explain how an enemy aircraft found him in total darkness and nearly sent him and his crew to the bottom of the Atlantic. But he won't have an answer. None of them will. Not yet. May 19, 1943. U-boat bunker, Saint-Nazaire, France. The concrete walls of the German III bunker are 8 meters thick, designed to withstand the heaviest British bombs. Inside this fortress, U-456 sits in its pen, surrounded by scaffolding as dockyard workers swarm over the damaged hull like ants on a carcass. The shriek of metal grinders and the sharp crack of welding torches echo off the massive concrete overhead, a constant industrial symphony that never stops, day or night. Captain Lieutenant Teachet stands on the dock, his patrol report clutched in one hand, watching his boat being dissected and repaired. His flotilla commander, Fregattenkapitän Rolf Ruggeberg, stands beside him, reading the report with a deep frown creasing his weathered face. And the Metox gave you no advance warning? Ruggeberg asks, not for the first time. No, sir. Weber is one of my best operators. He had the detector running continuously, monitored it himself. Nothing. Then suddenly, seconds before the attack, a strong contact. By then, it was too late to dive deep enough. Ruggeberg looks up from the report, his eyes scanning the other U-boat pens. Of the 12 boats currently in Saint-Nazaire, 9 have battle damage. Not from convoy escorts. Not from destroyers or corvettes. From aircraft. Aircraft attacking at night with impossible accuracy. You're the 7th commander this week to report the same phenomenon, Ruggeberg says quietly. Night attacks. No advance warning. Perfect accuracy. He pauses. Teachet, I'm going to be direct with you. BDU thinks the British have new radar. Radar that the Metox cannot detect. Teachet feels a chill despite the warm May air. That would mean dash. That would mean every time you surface at night, you're visible to them. You think you're invisible, but you're lit up like a Christmas tree on their equipment. The implications are staggering. For 3 years, the U-boats have owned the night. Surface at night, run your diesels, charge your batteries, cover distance quickly on the surface where the boat is fastest. The darkness has been their shield, their protection, their tactical advantage. If that's gone, how is this possible? Teachet asks. The Metox was supposed to give us warning of any radar. The Metox was designed to detect their metric wavelength radar, Ruggeberg replies. What if they've developed something that operates on a different wavelength entirely? Something shorter? Is that even possible? Ruggeberg has no answer. Neither do the scientists back in Germany who are frantically trying to understand what's happening. The German radar development program has focused on longer wavelengths, easier to generate, easier to work with. The idea that the British could have leapfrogged ahead to centimetric wavelengths seems almost absurd. The power requirements alone should make it impossible to fit such a device into an aircraft. But the loss reports don't lie. May 24, 1943. 2:14 hours. 400 miles west of Brest. Oberleutnant Sir C. Werner Henke, the same officer who reported battery levels on U-456, now commands his own boat, U-515. He's 29 years old, an aggressive commander with 4 patrols and 15 ships sunk to his credit. Tonight, he's running on the surface under a moonless sky, making good speed toward his operational area off the coast of West Africa. Henke stands on the bridge, feeling invincible. His boat is fresh, his crew is experienced, and the darkness is absolute. Not even starlight penetrates the cloud layer above. He checks his watch. They've been surfaced for 90 minutes, batteries at 85%. Another 30 minutes and they'll dive, hunt for a convoy during daylight hours using the hydrophones, then surface again tomorrow night. The Metox operator, Matrosengefreiter Paul Schroeder, has reported nothing. The radar detector has been silent all night.
No threats.
No aircraft. Nothing. Sir, what's that sound? Asks one of the lookouts suddenly. Henke strains his ears. At first, there's nothing but the rumble of the diesels and the splash of water against the hull. Then he hears it faint but growing louder. Aircraft engines. Multiple engines. Metox report. Henke shouts down the voice pipe. Nothing, Herr Oberleutnant. The Metox shows nothing.
Impossible.
But the sound is unmistakable now, and growing louder by the second. Henke makes his decision in a heartbeat. Alarm. Clear the bridge. The klaxon wails. The lookouts scramble below. Henke takes one last look at the sky. Still nothing visible, just that growing roar, and drops through the hatch, pulling it shut behind him. Flood. Emergency dive. Take her down fast. U-515 noses down, the ballast tanks filling with rushing seawater. The depth gauge begins its climb. 5 meters. 10 meters. 15 meters. 20 meters. The first depth charge explodes to starboard, a massive concussion that slams the boat sideways. The second and third come in rapid succession, bracketing U-515 with precision that makes Henke's skin crawl. They're not random drops. They are targeted. Calculated. The aircraft knows exactly where they are. Cork and paint chips rain down. A light bulb shatters. Someone yelps in pain as they're thrown against a valve wheel. But the boat holds together. The hull groans and pops under the pressure, but it holds. Damage report. Henke orders, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. Minor damage only. They've been lucky. But as U-515 slips deeper into the safety of the ocean depths, Henke can't shake the image from his mind, the Metox showing nothing. Absolutely nothing. Right up until the moment the aircraft was directly overhead. They've been marked, targeted, attacked, and they never saw it coming. June 2nd, 1943. 18:47 hours. RAF Coastal Command, Ballakele, Northern Ireland. Flight Lieutenant David Moore climbs down from the cockpit of his Vickers Wellington bomber, his legs stiff after 8 hours in the air. The ground crew swarms around the aircraft, refueling and checking the engines for tomorrow's patrol. Moore pulls off his leather flying helmet and runs a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Good hunt, sir?" asks Sergeant Collins, the crew chief. "Found 2 of them," Moore replies, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "One confirmed kill south of Iceland. The other crash-dived before we could finish it, but we definitely hurt him." Collins grins. "The new kit's working then?" "Like magic, Sergeant. Like absolute magic." The new kit is the ASV Mk III radar mounted in the nose of Moore's Wellington. To look at it, it seems impossible that such a device could work so well. The antennae rotating dish, just 28 inches in diameter, seems far too small to be effective. But the power output from the cavity magnetron is extraordinary, and the 10-centimeter wavelength provides resolution that the older metric radar could never achieve. Moore has been flying coastal command patrols for 2 years now. He remembers the old days, endless hours of visual searching, occasionally picking up a surface U-boat on the ASV Mk II radar at maybe 5 miles in perfect conditions. More often, the radar was useless, its long wavelength producing fuzzy returns that could be a submarine or a whale or a patch of rough water. They relied on luck, on moonlight, on the Mark I eyeball. Now it's a completely different war. Moore walks into the operations building and heads straight to the debriefing room, where Intelligence Officer Squadron Leader Hastings waits with his clipboard and maps. "Contact report, David," Hastings says by way of greeting. Moore sits and recounts the patrol in detail. First contact at 3:42 hours, bearing 270, range 9.3 miles. Surface vessel. Tracked it for 6 minutes as we approached. Visual identification at 2 miles, definitely a Type 7 U-boat, running on the surface. He must have spotted us or heard our engines because he started his crash dive just as we began our run. Dropped 6 depth charges in a pattern. Oil slick and debris came up. Large air bubble. I'm claiming it as a kill. Hastings makes notes. Second contact. 12:14 hours. Range 10.2 miles. Another Type 7. This one dove before we could get close enough to attack effectively, but we dropped 4 charges on his dive point. Saw some oil but no debris. Probable damage. And the radar performed well throughout. Moore laughs. Performed well? Sir, it's like hunting with a spotlight. I could see those boats on the scope clearer than I can see my own hand in front of my face on a dark night. The radar operator called out ranges, bearings, even the U-boat speed. We tracked that first boat for 6 minutes while it had absolutely no idea we were there. It's not a fair fight anymore. And it's not. Across the Atlantic, Coastal Command aircraft equipped with ASV Mk III are finding U-boats with devastating efficiency. The U-boats surface at night believing they're safe, believing the darkness protects them. But the darkness means nothing anymore. The centimetric radar penetrates it effortlessly. The numbers tell the story. In March 1943, 15 U-boats were lost. In April, 16. But in May the month U-456 was nearly sunk. The month the ASV Mk III began widespread deployment, 43 U-boats went down. 43. Nearly a third of all U-boats at sea. The commanders who survived their patrols returned to port with wild theories. Some think the British have developed infrared detection systems that can see the heat from the diesel engines. Others believe the Metox detectors themselves are somehow betraying their positions, that the British have found a way to track the Metox receivers. One commander even suggests that Allied aircraft are using some form of acoustic detection, listening for the sound of diesel engines from miles away. None of them guess the truth. None of them imagine that the British have made such a revolutionary leap in radar technology. The German Technical Intelligence Services have captured Allied aircraft equipped with the older ASV Mk II radar. They've studied it extensively. They understand it. But they haven't captured an aircraft with ASV Mk III. Not yet. And until they do, the Germans are fighting blind, trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. June 5, 1943. BDU Headquarters, Berlin. Großadmiral Donitz stands at the head of the conference table, his face drawn and tired. Around him sit his senior staff officers, along with representatives from German radar development programs and naval intelligence. On the wall behind them, a large map of the Atlantic shows the positions of every U-boat at sea. Red pins mark the locations of U-boats that never came home. There are too many red pins. Gentlemen, Donitz begins, his voice heavy with frustration. In the first 5 months of this year, we have lost 118 U-boats. 118 boats and their crews. The losses in May alone. He pauses, his jaw tightening. May was a catastrophe. We cannot sustain this rate of attrition. We cannot replace boats and crews fast enough. If this continues, we will lose the Battle of the Atlantic. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. For Germany, the Atlantic is everything. It's the lifeline between Britain and America. Cut that lifeline, and Britain falls. Lose control of the Atlantic, and the war is lost. Every man in this room knows it. We need answers, Donitz continues. How are they finding our boats at night? Our commanders report attacks in zero visibility conditions. Aircraft that appear without warning and drop their charges with impossible accuracy. The Metox is useless. It either detects nothing or detects the enemy only seconds before attack. So I ask you, what has changed? Captain C. Hans Meckel, head of the Naval Communications Research Department, stands. He's a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the nervous energy of someone who hasn't slept properly in weeks. Herr Gross Admiral, we have analyzed every patrol report from the past 3 months. We have interviewed surviving commanders. We have examined captured Allied equipment. Our conclusion is that the British have developed a new form of radar operating on a much shorter wavelength than their previous systems. We estimate this new radar operates somewhere in the centimetric range, perhaps 10 centimeters or shorter. Can we detect this radar? Meckel shakes his head. Not with the current Metox equipment. No. The Metox is designed for metric wavelengths. To detect centimetric radar, we would need an entirely new detector operating on completely different principles. We are working on it, but how long? 6 months. Perhaps 8. And that's assuming our theory is correct. 6 months. Donitz feels the weight of those words. 6 months of losses at the current rate would mean the destruction of the entire U-boat fleet. Unacceptable. Then we must assume the British can see our boats whenever they surface at night, Donitz says slowly, thinking aloud. Which means we must change our tactics. Order all boats to remain submerged during darkness. Surface only during daylight hours when they can see aircraft approaching and have time to dive. That will severely limit their operational effectiveness, one of the staff officers protests. Running submerged means slower speeds, limited battery capacity, reduced patrol ranges. I'm aware of the limitations, Donitz snaps. But I would rather have effective boats moving slowly than have them destroyed by an enemy we cannot detect. Issue the order. All boats. Effective immediately. The order goes out that evening, transmitted in code to every U-boat at sea. Surface only during daylight. Assume the enemy can detect you at night regardless of visibility conditions. The darkness is no longer your friend. For the U-boat crews, it's a devastating psychological blow. The night was their kingdom, their hunting ground, their sanctuary. Now they're being told to hide during darkness and expose themselves during the day. It feels backward. Wrong. Suicidal. But it's better than the alternative, better than continuing to be hunted by an invisible enemy they cannot understand, cannot detect, and cannot fight. On U-456, now back at sea after repairs, Captain Lieutenant Teachert receives the new orders with grim understanding. He passes them to his crew, watches their faces fall as they realize what it means. They're no longer predators. They are prey. And somewhere in the skies over the Atlantic, Flight Lieutenant Moore and hundreds of pilots like him climb into their aircraft, their ASV Mk III radar sets already humming with power, ready for another night of hunting. July 8, 1943. Bay of Biscay, 80 miles northwest of Cape Finisterre. Corvettan Captain Joachim Schepke commands U-522, a Type IXC boat returning from a disappointing patrol in the Caribbean. In 6 weeks at sea, they've sunk only one merchantman 4,000-ton freighter sailing independently, easy prey. The convoy they'd tracked for 3 days managed to evade them, and twice they'd been forced to crash dive when aircraft appeared seemingly from nowhere. Now they're running the gauntlet of the Bay of Biscay, the most dangerous water in the world for U-boats. The bay is a killing ground where Allied aircraft from bases in England and northern Spain hunt submarines making the transit to and from the French ports. Schepke has ordered them to remain submerged during darkness, following the new directives from BDU. They surface now at 8:20 hours, just after sunrise, under a clearing sky with good visibility. Clear the bridge. Schepke orders as soon as the hatch opens. For lookouts scramble up with him, binoculars already raised, scanning the horizon in all directions. The morning air is cool and fresh after the recycled staleness of the boat's interior. Schepke takes a deep breath and begins his own scan. The standing orders are explicit: surface during daylight only, keep the lookouts alert, and dive immediately at the first sign of aircraft. It's a calculated risk. The British Coastal Command patrols are relentless, but at least in daylight, the U-boat crew has a fighting chance. They can see the enemy coming. They have the 3 to 4 minutes needed to crash dive and escape to depth before the aircraft can complete its attack run. Or so the theory goes. U-522 has been on the surface for 19 minutes when Obergefreiter Hans Dietrich, the starboard lookout, spots at a dark speck against the clouds to the north, maybe 8 miles distant.
Aircraft. Bearing 350. High altitude.
Schepke swings his binoculars. There. A 4-engine aircraft. Probably a British Liberator. It's flying straight and level, not yet turning toward them. Perhaps the pilot hasn't spotted them yet. Perhaps they still have time. Watch it, Schepke orders. Report any change in heading. The protocol is clear. If the aircraft turns toward them, dive immediately. But if it maintains its course and passes by, they can stay on the surface and continue charging batteries. Diving and resurfacing wastes fuel and time. Every U-boat commander has to make these judgment calls dozens of times per patrol. 30 seconds pass. The aircraft continues on its heading. It's going to pass to the west of them, maybe 6 or 7 miles at the closest point. Schepke allows himself to relax slightly. They haven't been spotted. Then the aircraft turns. A smooth, deliberate turn to the south, directly toward U-522. Alarm. Clear the bridge. The lookouts pour through the hatch. Schepke is right behind them, slamming the hatch shut and spinning the wheel as the klaxon wails throughout the boat. Dive! Dive! Emergency dive! The chief engineer floods the tanks. The bow dips down. Water rushes over the foredeck. The depth gauge starts climbing 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters. The explosion comes at 18 meters depth. Not as close as the attack on U-456, but close enough. The boat shudders and groans. The lights flicker. A gauge shatters, spraying glass across the control room. But the hull holds. Schepke orders them down to 100 meters and silent running. They stay deep for 2 hours before creeping back to periscope depth. Through the periscope, Schepke can see the surface is clear. The aircraft is gone. They've survived. But as U-522 surfaces again and resumes its transit, Schepke cannot shake a disturbing realization. That aircraft turned toward them from 8 miles away. 8 miles in clear daylight. The lookouts had barely spotted the aircraft as a speck on the horizon, yet somehow the pilot had not only seen them but identified them as a U-boat and turned to attack. 8 miles. In bright daylight. How? July 13, 1943. Pelorus Naval Air Station, Cornwall, England. Squadron leader Thomas Bennett walks across the tarmac toward the smoking wreckage of a Wellington bomber. The aircraft had crashed on landing 2 hours ago after a patrol over the Bay of Biscay. The pilot and crew survived shaken but uninjured, but the aircraft is a total loss. The fuselage is crumpled, the wings twisted, and small fires still burn in the port engine despite the efforts of the fire crews. Bennett isn't here to investigate the crash. He's here for something far more urgent. "Where's the radar set?" he asks the station commander who's accompanied him to the wreck. "Forward compartment, sir. The nose section is relatively intact." They approach the shattered nose of the aircraft. Through the broken plexiglass, Bennett can see the ASV Mk III radar display, miraculously still mounted in its frame though the screen is cracked. More importantly, he can see the magnetron unit and the antenna assembly. "Get it out," Bennett orders. "All of it. Every component. And get it out now. We have maybe 3 hours before the salvage crews descend on this wreck, and I need that radar equipment gone before then." Within 90 minutes, a team of technicians has carefully removed every piece of the ASV Mk III system from the wrecked Wellington. They load it into a covered lorry and drive it away under guard. Bennett watches them go with relief. The secret is safe. For now. But he knows it's only a matter of time. You cannot fight a war with a secret weapon without eventually losing that weapon to the enemy. The Germans have been working frantically to understand the new Allied radar. They've interviewed every U-boat commander who survived an attack. They've analyzed the patterns and frequencies. They've developed theories. What they don't have is the hardware. They haven't captured an intact ASV Mk III set. Not yet. But Bennett knows it will happen eventually. An aircraft will be shot down over occupied territory. Or a set will wash ashore after a crash at sea. Or worst case, a bomber will be forced to land in neutral territory where German intelligence agents can examine it. When that happens, the secret will be out, and the Germans will begin developing countermeasures. The question is, how much longer can the Allies maintain their advantage? July 19, 1943. U-boat bunker, Lorient, France. Captain Lieutenant Horst von Schroeter climbs down from U-667's conning tower, his face grim. His boat has been at sea for 38 days, and in that entire patrol, he's sunk exactly nothing. Not one ship. Not even a fishing trawler. Twice he'd gotten into position to attack convoys, and both times aircraft had appeared and forced him deep. For the rest of the patrol, he'd spent most of his time submerged, creeping along at 3 knots to conserve battery power, surfacing only for brief periods during daylight to charge batteries and gulp fresh air. It's not warfare. It's hiding. In the wardroom that evening, von Schroeter meets with other U-boat commanders who've recently returned from patrol. The mood is dark. The liquor flows freely, but it doesn't lift anyone's spirits. 3 merchantmen, reports Captain Lieutenant Ernst Kals, commander of U-130. That's all. And I nearly lost my boat twice to aircraft. Once at night, once during the day. I don't understand how they're finding us. The radar, says another commander, Oberleutnant Peter Eweth of U-850. It has to be new radar. Nothing else makes sense. But what kind of radar can see us 8 or 10 miles away? Our own radar sets can barely detect a convoy at 5 miles. I heard, von Schroeter says quietly, leaning in so his voice doesn't carry beyond their table, that Meckel's people in Berlin think the British have developed centimetric radar. Wavelengths of 10 centimeters or less. The other commanders stare at him. Eweth shakes his head. Impossible. The power requirements alone, you'd need equipment that weighs tons. You couldn't fit it in an aircraft. And yet, von Schroeter replies, they're detecting us from ranges that shouldn't be possible. In weather conditions that shouldn't allow detection. At night. During the day. It doesn't matter anymore. They can see us whenever we're on the surface. Kals drains his schnapps and sets the glass down hard. Then we're finished. The boat's effectiveness is cut by 70% if we have to stay submerged most of the time. We can't cover distance. We can't find targets. We can't press attacks. We're reduced to skulking around underwater hoping to stumble across a lone merchantman. No one contradicts him because he's right. The U-boat force, once the terror of the Atlantic, the weapon that nearly brought Britain to its knees, is being systematically neutralized by a technology they cannot detect, cannot understand, and cannot counter. August 2, 1943. Flensburg, Germany. Funkmess BO Batchtungsdienst facility. Captain Hans Rudolf Rosing stands in the laboratory, watching technicians work on what they're calling the Naxos detector. It's the result of 2 months of frantic development work, a radar detector designed to pick up centimetric wavelengths, specifically the 10-centimeter band where German scientists believe the new Allied radar operates. Will it work? Rosing asks Dr. Wilhelm Runge, the lead scientist on the project. Runge adjusts his glasses nervously. In theory, yes. The receiver is sensitive enough to detect radar transmissions in the 8 to 12 centimeter range. But we haven't been able to test it against actual Allied equipment. We're working blind, Herr Captain. We believe the British radar operates at 10 centimeters, but we could be wrong. It could be 9 centimeters. It could be 12. Until we capture an actual unit and examine it. How long until you can have production units ready? 2 months. Perhaps 3. We need to finalize the design, set up production lines, train operators. You have 6 weeks, Rosing interrupts. 6 weeks to get the first production units to the U-boat bases. After that, we'll refine the design based on combat feedback. But we need something in the boat's hands now, Doctor. Now. Even if it's not perfect. Runge looks like he wants to argue, but he simply nods. 6 weeks. We'll do our best. As Rosing leaves the facility and climbs into his staff car, He wonders if 6 weeks will be fast enough. The loss rates are already catastrophic. July was slightly better than May, only 37 boats lost instead of 43, but only 37 is still unsustainable. At this rate, the entire operational U-boat fleet will be gone by the end of the year. The drive back to Kiel takes 3 hours. Rosing uses the time to review casualty reports, patrol summaries, and intelligence assessments. One report in particular catches his attention, an analysis by the operations staff estimating that Allied aircraft are now responsible for over 60% of U-boat losses. 60%. Aircraft used to be a nuisance, an occasional threat that could be evaded by crash diving. Now they're the primary killer of U-boats. The report includes a chilling statistic. In July, U-boats achieved an exchange rate of 1.2 merchantmen sunk per U-boat lost. Last year at this time, the exchange rate was over 8 merchantmen per U-boat. The entire calculus of the Atlantic campaign has shifted. The U-boats are no longer hunters. They are targets. August 12, 1943. 3:18 hours. Mid-Atlantic, 650 miles southwest of the Azores. Oberleutnant Heinrich Lehrmann-Willenbrock stands on the bridge of U-256, his binoculars pressed against his face, scanning the dark horizon. It's another moonless night. Cloud cover obscures the stars. The wind is from the northwest at 15 knots, kicking up moderate seas that splash over the bow. Perfect conditions for a night attack on a convoy. Except they're not hunting. They are running. Running on the surface at 14 knots, trying to reach their patrol station south of the Azores before their fuel runs too low. And every minute they spend on the surface, Lehrmann-Willenbrock feels the weight of invisible eyes watching him. The Metox detector has been screaming for the past 5 minutes, a strong contact bearing northeast. But there's nothing visible. No aircraft.
No Searchlights.
No engine sounds. Just the Metox's urgent warning that somewhere out there, radar waves are washing over his boat. "Sir, the signal is getting stronger," reports the Metox operator from below. "He's closing on us." Lehrmann-Willenbrock makes the hardest decision a U-boat commander can make. Secure the diesels. Switch to electric motors. Reduce speed to 6 knots. The rumble of the diesels dies. The boat slows, wallowing in the swells. They're now running on batteries alone, quiet, producing less wake, less disturbance on the surface. Harder to detect. Maybe. All lookouts, maximum attention, Lehrmann-Willenbrock orders. Watch for exhaust flames, searchlights, anything. They wait. The Metox contact remains strong but doesn't get closer. 5 minutes pass. 10 minutes. 15. Then the Metox signal fades. Contact weakening, sir. He's moving away. Bearing now 040. They've done it. Whatever was hunting them, and Lehrmann-Willenbrock has no doubt they were being hunted, has passed by. Perhaps the reduced speed helped. Perhaps running on electric motors made them harder to detect. Or perhaps they were just lucky. Resume diesels. Back to 14 knots, Lehrmann-Willenbrock orders. But as U-256 accelerates back to full surface speed, he knows they can't run silent forever. The batteries will drain. They'll need to recharge. And when they do, they'll be vulnerable again. It's a war of cat and mouse, except the mouse has suddenly grown claws and learned to see in the dark. And the cat is starting to realize it might be the one being hunted. August 20th, 1943. BDU Headquarters, Berlin. Großadmiral Donitz reviews the monthly summary with growing despair. 25 boats lost in August. Not as bad as May, but still catastrophic. And the tonnage sunk has dropped to 264,000 tons, less than half what it was a year ago. The mathematics are brutal. Germany is building 10 new U-boats per month and losing 25. The operational fleet is shrinking. By October, at this rate, there won't be enough boats to maintain effective patrol lines. "We need the new detectors," Donitz says to his assembled staff. "When will the first Naxos units be ready for deployment?" "End of September, Herr Großadmiral," replies his technical liaison. "Initial production run of 50 units. They'll go to the boats first, the ones with the most experienced commanders." And if the Naxos doesn't work? If the British radar isn't operating at 10 centimeters. Silence. No one wants to voice that possibility. Donitz stands and walks to the wall map. He traces his finger along the convoy routes, the great arcs of merchantmen crossing from America to Britain, from Britain to Murmansk, from Britain to Gibraltar. Each route is marked with flags showing U-boat patrol positions. There are so few flags now. So few boats left to contest the Atlantic. Gentlemen, Donitz says quietly, we are losing this battle. Not because our men lack courage, they have courage in abundance. Not because our boats lack capability, the Type 7 and Type 9 are excellent designs. We're losing because the enemy has achieved a technological breakthrough that has fundamentally altered the balance of power. Until we can counter that breakthrough, every patrol is a suicide mission. Every boat that leaves port may not return. He turns to face his officers. But we cannot stop. Germany needs us to continue the fight. So we will adapt. New tactics. New equipment. New approaches. And we will hope that somewhere, somehow, we capture one of these British radar sets intact so we can finally understand what we're fighting against. It's a vain hope, and everyone in the room knows it. The British are fanatically careful about their ASV Mk III equipment. Crashed aircraft are salvaged or destroyed before German forces can reach them. Damaged bombers limp home rather than landing in neutral territory. The secret is being guarded zealously. But secrets, Donitz knows, cannot be kept forever. Eventually, the equipment will fall into German hands. Eventually, they'll understand the technology. Eventually, they'll develop countermeasures. The question is whether the U-boat force will survive long enough to benefit from those countermeasures. Outside the headquarters building, the summer sun is setting over Berlin. In the Atlantic, 40 U-boats are at sea, their crews sleeping in shifts, eating tinned food, breathing recycled air, and wondering when the invisible enemy will strike next. And high above the ocean, Allied aircraft continue their patrols, their radar screens painting clear pictures of any submarine foolish enough to show itself on the surface. The hunters have become the hunted. The Battle of the Atlantic has entered a new and deadly phase. February 2nd, 1944.
Rotterdam, Nederlands.
The short Sunderland flying boat lies broken on the shore of the Nieuwe Maas River, its hull cracked open like an eggshell, one wing torn completely away. It crashed 3 hours ago after being hit by flak from German coastal batteries, a lucky shot that shredded the port fuel tanks and sent the massive aircraft spiraling into the water. 2 of the crew died in the impact. The other 8 are now prisoners, being transported to interrogation centers where they'll be questioned about Allied patrol patterns and tactics. But Oberstleutnant Werner Hartmann isn't interested in the crew. He's interested in what's mounted in the aircraft's nose. Hartmann commands a Luftwaffe Technical Intelligence Unit tasked with examining captured Allied equipment. He's been waiting for this moment for 8 months, waiting for an aircraft equipped with the mysterious new radar to fall into German hands intact enough to be studied. He's examined wreckage before, charred components pulled from crash sites, fragments that told him nothing. But this Sunderland, despite its catastrophic landing, has its forward compartment relatively intact. Carefully, Hartmann orders as his technicians approach the nose section with crowbars and cutting torches. I want every component removed and catalogued. Treat it like it's made of glass. The work takes 4 hours. The radar display unit comes out first, a cathode ray tube in a ruggedized housing, its screen cracked but the internal components visible. Then the transmitter unit. Then the antenna assembly, a rotating dish just 28 inches across, absurdly small for a radar antenna, yet clearly the source of all their problems. But it's the magnetron that makes Hartmann's breath catch. The cavity magnetron sits in its housing like a mechanical heart, its copper structure gleaming under the work lights. Hartmann lifts it carefully, feeling its weight. It's small, impossibly small to generate the kind of power needed for effective radar. Yet here it is. Physical proof of British innovation that has cost hundreds of U-boat crews their lives. Pack everything, Hartmann orders. We're taking it to Berlin tonight. February 5th, 1944.
Telefunkenlaboratories, Berlin.
Dr. Wilhelm Runge hasn't slept in 3 days. The components from the Rotterdam Sunderland are spread across 3 laboratory tables, each piece labeled and photographed. Runge moves between the tables like a man possessed, making measurements, taking notes, occasionally stopping to stare at the magnetron with something approaching reverence. "It's brilliant," he mutters to his assistant, Dr. Klaus Weber. "Absolutely brilliant. Look at the cavity structure, 8 resonant cavities arranged in a circle. The electrons spiral through the magnetic field, interacting with each cavity in sequence. The power output must be... Weber, hand me those calculations." Weber passes him a sheaf of papers covered in mathematical notations. Runge scans them, his eyes widening. 10 kilowatts pulse power. 10 kilowatts. At a wavelength of 9.7 centimeters. Do you understand what this means? The British managed to generate radar power at centimetric wavelengths that we thought impossible. Our own magnetron research hasn't achieved even half this output. Can we duplicate it? Weber asks. Runge sets down the calculations and looks at the dismantled magnetron. Duplicate it? Yes, given time and resources. But by the time we build production units and install them in our own aircraft, the British will have moved on to the next innovation. We're always one step behind, Weber. Always reacting, never anticipating. But the Naxos detector dash. The Naxos is too little, too late, Runge interrupts. Yes, it can detect this radar. But detection alone doesn't solve the problem. The U-boats know they're being tracked, but knowing doesn't help them escape. An aircraft at 10 miles can close the distance in less than 4 minutes. Even with warning, a U-boat needs 3 to 4 minutes to dive deep enough to be safe. The margins are too thin. Runge walks to the window and stares out at the grey Berlin sky. The British won the Battle of the Atlantic with this device. They won it in the spring of 1943, and we're only now understanding how they did it. By the time we develop countermeasures, the war will have moved on. He's right, though he doesn't yet know the full scope of how right he is. The statistics tell the story. In 1943, Germany lost 237 U-boats. 237 boats and their crews, roughly 9,500 men, sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. The exchange rate collapsed from 8 merchantmen per U-boat in early 1943 to less than 1 merchantman per U-boat by year's end. The convoy system, combined with escort carriers, long-range patrol aircraft, and most critically the ASV Mk III radar, made U-boat operations suicidal. March 14, 1944. U-boat bunker, Brest, France. Captain Lieutenant Teachert stands in the wardroom of U-456, holding the Naxos detector that was installed during their last refit. It's a compact unit with a small antenna that mounts on the conning tower, supposedly capable of detecting the British centimetric radar that's been hunting them for nearly a year. "Does it work?" asks his first officer, Oberleutnant Henke. "The technicians say it does," Teachert replies. "They say it can detect radar at 9 to 12 centimeters wavelength. They say it will give us 5 to 7 minutes warning instead of 30 seconds. Do you believe them?" Teachert sets the detector down carefully. "I believe they're trying. I believe German scientists finally figured out what the British have been using against us. But Henke, even with 7 minutes warning, we're still vulnerable. 7 minutes to dive, hide, hope they don't get us. It's not a solution. It's a bandage on a severed artery." Henke nods slowly. Both men know the truth. The war in the Atlantic has been lost. The U-boats achieved their greatest successes in 1942, when radar was primitive and convoy escorts were stretched thin. But 1943 changed everything. The technological balance shifted. The Allies poured resources into anti-submarine warfare, more aircraft, more escorts, better sensors, improved weapons. And at the center of it all, the cavity magnetron and the ASV Mk III radar that made darkness meaningless. How many boats from our training class are still operational? Henke asks quietly. Teachert doesn't need to check the records. He knows. 11. Out of 42 boats that completed training in 1941, 11 are still at sea. The rest are on the bottom. The silence that follows is heavy with the weight of lost friends, lost crews, lost boats. The U-boat service has become a death sentence. The average survival rate for a U-boat crew in 1944 is 3 patrols. 3 patrols before the odds catch up with you, before the aircraft finds you on the surface, before the depth charges tear your hull apart and the ocean pours in. 1 more patrol, Teacher says finally. We have orders for 1 more patrol. After that, we'll see if we come home. June 8, 1944. Mid-Atlantic. U-456 never made it home. The boat was caught on the surface by a Royal Canadian Air Force Liberator equipped with ASV Mk III radar during the early morning hours of April 19, 1944. The attack was swift and precise. 8 depth charges bracketed the diving submarine. The hull cracked under the pressure. 51 men died when U-456 plunged to the ocean floor, taking Teacher and all his crew with it. The Liberator pilot, Flight Lieutenant Robert Tate, reported the kill with professional detachment, radar contact at 11.2 miles. Tracked target for 6 minutes. Visual contact at 1.8 miles as target began crash dive. Depth charges released in pattern. Large oil slick and debris field observed. Classified as certain kill. For Tate, it was his 4th U-boat kill. The radar made it almost routine locate the target, close the distance, attack before the submarine could reach safety. The technology that U-boat commanders like Teacher couldn't understand for so long had become the cornerstone of Allied anti-submarine warfare. By June 1944, when Allied forces landed in Normandy, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively over. U-boats still operated, still sank ships, still fought with the desperate courage of men who knew they were losing. But the statistics were damning. In the first 6 months of 1944, Germany lost 63 U-boats while sinking only 78 Allied ships. The exchange rate had inverted completely. The centimetric radar, that small rotating dish powered by the cavity magnetron, had accomplished what aircraft carriers, destroyers, corvettes, and thousands of depth charges could not. It had broken the back of the U-boat offensive. The German submariners fought bravely, adapted their tactics, installed new detection equipment, but they were fighting against physics itself. You cannot hide from electromagnetic radiation. You cannot make a steel submarine invisible to radar. The darkness that once protected them had become irrelevant. April 30, 1945. Flensburg, Germany. Großadmiral Donitz, head of the German government following Hitler's suicide, issues the final order to the remaining U-boats: cease offensive operations and prepare to surrender. Of the 1,162 U-boats commissioned during the war, 785 have been lost. Over 30,000 men, 75% of all U-boat personnel, are dead. In the technical archives, Dr. Runge reports on the captured ASV Mk III equipment gather dust. The knowledge came too late. Even if Germany had developed effective countermeasures, even if they had created their own centimetric radar, the industrial and material advantage of the Allies was too great. The U-boats could not win a war of attrition, and the technology that allowed Allied aircraft to hunt them in complete darkness had turned every patrol into a suicide mission. Years later, historians would identify the spring of 1943 as the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic, the moment when Allied technology and tactics finally overcame the U-boat threat. At the center of that turning point was a device most people had never heard of: the cavity magnetron and the centimetric radar it powered. German submariners went to their deaths not understanding how the enemy could see them in total darkness from 10 miles away. By the time they learned the truth, it was far too late to matter. The invisible enemy had won.